All right, so let's discuss the book of the month. We have A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. You guys know I talk about this book all the time. I love this book. It changed my life. Again, just rereading it and going through it. It's so funny because when we open this up to the universe and when we really open up to learning and growing and, reading and absorbing, it's like you gain something new every single time. It just amazes me. It's incredible. So I have quite a few notes that I do want to go through that I feel were the important parts that really helped me understand myself on a deeper level. Take what resonates with you, use it, apply it, see what works for you, and move forward with that. So with this book, as I said before, I've read this a few times. This is how I have grown between the ego work, identifying the ego and how it shows up, which has created my belief system. When I started to really shift those behaviors and those patterns and understand the root of where they were coming from and how they showed up, that combined with inner child work, which we'll go into in another discussion, but those have been the catalyst for my spiritual evolution up until this point. It has been some of the most transformation that I've ever experienced. And with the ego, I feel like this is ever evolving. Same thing with the higher self. I feel like this is a lifelong journey, and this is just where I'm at in my journey. So of course, I'm going to share everything that I possibly can with all of you guys. So with this book, I'm going to go through different areas, like I said, that really stood out to me, and even going back through again that were still new things that were kind of popping up, and I'll sort of connect it with how it kind of applied and worked in my life and works in my life, and just kind of how I move forward. So we'll start off talking about what the ego is and the realization with reading this book and understanding how it shows up. So it's interesting because I say this all the time, but for the longest time, I did not know that I am separate from the voice inside of my head, that I am separate from the thoughts that are on repeat. And it wasn't until I understood that I am the space between, I know I keep talking about the stillness between our thoughts and our body, but that really is our soul stepping forward. So when I started to differentiate between the fearful limiting thoughts of always wanting more and things never being good enough, and I started to refocus my energy to what is this showing me, and why is this here, and why why is this coming up, and why am I not feeling this fulfillment that I desire. I remember even starting my blog, this was when I was reading A New Earth. I think it was the first time or second time, and I don't think I had even gone through my divorce yet. And I remember, or maybe I was in the process of going through it, so my whole life was just completely turned upside down. But I remember creating my blog, and it is called The Path to Fulfillment. And that's why I chose the path to rediscovery, because the path to fulfillment was me unraveling my ego and my belief system. So when we begin to realize that the ego self is always acting out of wanting recognition, it's always wanting more, it's wanting to stand out, it's wanting to be the shining star, but it's wanting to do it in a way because it feels like it needs it to thrive, it needs it to survive. And when you enter into more of that soulful space where you just know what is, and you surrender and you flow, you can feel the difference within the resistance to the love that then comes in. So it's realizing the pattern of the ego. I feel like that is the awakening process when we talk about being awake and aware of, being conscious. That conscious energy is the awareness of the ego, because where the awareness is, the ego cannot exist. So I always say this, but the ego exists in the past and in the future. If you are living in the present moment and you are focused in on who you are at this very moment and what is happening in your life at this very moment, the ego cannot be in that space. So whenever we consciously bring our awareness back into the present moment, back into what is directly right in front of us, Like what lesson is right in front of us, what project we're working on that's right in front of us, what relationship is moving right in front of us, what space is opening up in front of us. That is allowing the awareness and the conscious thought to come in over the repeating. The subconscious is on 24/7, even when we're sleeping. So it's like it's always playing these old thoughts, projecting into the future. So when we really stop and take note of that, when we really start to do that continuously, that is where the change really starts to happen. When I noticed I was moving through really big life lessons of how the ego would show up, and a lot of this is tied into a lot with my childhood abuse, because that is really where our ego takes form, right? Like it's from these past experiences, especially when you're a child before the age of 7, because that part of your brain, that processing part, cannot process out information. It just takes everything in. So you literally are a sponge, just absorbing all of the energy around you, all of the experiences, and we take that on as who we are. So it's like, I always love that Marianne Williamson quote where it's like, spirituality is like unlearning everything that we thought that we learned as a kid, like as when we were younger. It's like unlearning all of those patterns, and it's returning back to the loving part of ourself. Now, the beauty of the ego is it is a direct roadmap to parts of yourself that are ready to be more nourished, to be healed, and to be strengthened up within you. I deeply feel that our ego and the parts that it shows us are our superpowers. So it's like these most reactive and shameful parts of us, I feel, are our strongest parts. And when we begin to take that power back, that's where the strength begins to return. It's beautiful. So anytime that I'm just making sure I'm looking at my notes. So the ego is completely identified in the form, which is the physical, the thoughts, and the emotions of the form. So it's anytime where we're like, I am scared, or I am shameful, or I am fearful, or I am not good enough, or whatever it may be, that is the ego. That's how it lives. That's how it identifies itself. It's with the physical, the external physical, tangible evidence. And I always give this example, but I remember before I was aware of my ego and aware of how it showed up in my life, I made all of my choices from my ego standpoint, and that is how it continues to strengthen it. So it's like whatever you continuously, hang on, they're bringing me to a quote here that I had written down. And of course, I'm not going to be able to find it at the moment. It'll come in though. The message will come through. Yeah. Okay. So when I was living from my ego place, I stayed in this like hamster wheel of continuous unfulfillment because I was making my choices from the ego. So again, when we talk about the subconscious and conscious energy, when we consciously are creating our life, that is where we can bring in more of that fulfillment, more of that love, more of that soulful experience. When we are tapping into our ego and we are making choices from that, we are staying in that cycle. We are staying in that repeating belief. We are strengthening up that within us. So I think it's when you resist, what you resist persists, and it's what you resist persists. And then I'm bringing it back to what you see. Okay. Let me back up first and I will go back into this. So what I was doing is I was living from this ego standpoint. So everything that I had was empty. I had this really big house. I had these beautiful purses. I had nice shoes. I had all this stuff, and it was all empty. Because when my conscious energy behind when I was purchasing these things was out of lack, was out of need, because I was buying these things, needing them to make me feel more significant. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a big house and nice things and all of this, but it's the energy behind where your awareness is when you are setting these wheels in motion. And that's the important part with identifying with the ego. Now, the ego shows up as the victim. Hold on. It comes in as the lover, the victim, and the villain. So I always notice, especially stemming from my abuse, that I would always come in as the lover. Like I always had to overcompensate and overextend myself to give enough to other people because the ego thrived off of the rush that I would get from giving to someone because it made me feel important, because it made me feel seen. But what was happening is that I was giving all of me to someone else and I had nothing left within myself. And I stayed in this pattern for years and years and years. And I would do so much that I would actually exhaust myself and I would have no energy to work on, to look at any of my stuff because I was too focused in on other people. I was a people pleaser. And that was a coping mechanism. That was an ego response because that rush and that adrenaline rush and me giving, my ego disguised it as me having this like big heart and this open heart, but it was out of this emptiness within me. And because I was doing this out of this like need to feel, I was actually experiencing lack. I was experiencing more need because it was just this continuously like empty hole that I was filling up with empty things. Now, when it shows up as like the villain or as the victim, like I played victim for a really long time. Sometimes I still even do. Like, why would this person say this to me? Or why would this person do this to me? Like, I can't believe that they treated me that way. I can't believe this happened to me. When we look at the villain, like even creating other people as the villain or thinking other people are bad or whatever it is. It's what the beauty of this, when we see this in other people, this is why relationships are so important. And it's all relationships, even with strangers, people that you pass by on the street. Like even if I'm at the grocery store and I'm impatient and like someone in front of me is also impatient and whatever it is, I'm like, what is this showing me? Because if you're sitting in that energy and it's reflecting to you and you're picking up on it, that means you're putting that energy off. That means that you are feeling that. So when we looked at the victim, when we look at the lover and we look at the villain, look at what that's showing you within you. What are you using that as? How is that reflecting back to you in your life? Like how are you using that with other people? Because the reason it's reflecting back is because you are putting that out to other people, so other people are reflecting it back to you. Again, it's a roadmap back into yourself. Okay. So let's go into, the ego associates everything with being. The more that I have, the more important I am. It's in like a comparison. Like I used to compare myself to people, like why do they, they're more pretty or they have more money than me or what are they doing that more people like them or like whatever it is. It's comparing yourself to other people. And it's interesting because what happens is when we do that is we're actually dimming our light. We're dimming our gifts that we have been blessed with to give to this world. But if we're living in a space of one, not recognizing the gifts that we have within, and two, paying attention to everyone else and what everyone else is doing, we lose sight of what we have to offer. And what we have to offer is such a gift to people. But for so long, I was comparing myself and I'm like, why can't I accomplish this? Or why isn't this working for me? Or why isn't this happening for me? And it was because it wasn't coming from an authentic part within me. Because when you tap into your soul and it comes from this authentic part, things just flow. You know this. You have these synchronicities. You have the right people showing up in your life. It's because the energy that is aligned with your being, with your soul, is that which is leading the show. And it's not leading it from a lack or fearful or shameful place. Okay. Now, the ego, I always find this so interesting is when the ego starts to take form, like when we identify with the physical, I think this actually starts even from like when we're infants. Because if you think about it, when we talk about gender and we talk about society and how society views gender, like if you're male or female, you have to act a certain way, right? Like if you're female, maybe you have to act like more proper, or you have to be more appealing, or you have to please more people, or whatever it may be. And if you're masculine, if you're a male, maybe you have to hide your emotions more, or maybe you have to appear stronger, or you have to be the breadwinner, or whatever it is. But it's also like again, when we talk about the processing brain, the part of our brain when it's not fully developed, when before the ages of 7, this is what we're taking on. It's all of this energy around us, and we can't tell what is different, so we just take all of it on. So we think we have to be more proper, we think we have to be more ladylike, whatever that means, or we think we have to be stronger and we have to hide our emotions because that's what strength is. Again, this part of the ego, and when this develops, is then what creates our limiting beliefs. It creates our belief system of how we have to be and who we are. Okay. See here. Again, we are not the thoughts, we are the awareness of the thoughts. When you disconnect from the thought replaying, like if you catch yourself throughout the day and you're like, man, like I'm eating extra today, like I should really watch what I'm eating, because and then if you're like, wait a second, it's like, where the heck did that come from? And you're like, that's not who I am. I am the person who is aware of that thought. That is who I am. That's my truth. That's my authentic self. And you can begin to unravel the pattern of how it shows up. It's incredible. Okay, the core of the ego: thought, interpretation, memory, viewpoint, reaction, emotion. It's all ego, and it's all conditioned from our previous responses. It's all from our past experiences. Here it is. What you react to, this is what I was coming to earlier, and then I was sidetracked. What you react to in another, you are strengthening within yourself. What you react to in another person, you are strengthening within yourself. So if you are met with anger from a friend and you react with more anger, you're strengthening up the anger within yourself. And that's going to be continuously reflected back to you through your relationships, through your experiences. Now think of it this way. If someone is reacting to you from a place of love and you are returning back to with a place of love, what are you strengthening up? Love. Now, if someone is reacting to you out of anger and you are consciously aware of this, and you understand that their reaction is just their internal world, their reaction is how they feel about themselves and it has nothing to do with you, and you are able to disconnect that. If you are able to disconnect and say, okay, I understand that they're angry, I understand that they're feeling, fearful and shameful, this has nothing to do with who I am. All I can do is control my reaction and how I react to the situation. And if you meet them with love, if you meet them with understanding and compassion, that is what you will then get returned back to you. And this is where that switch comes in. This is where, when we start to pay attention to what is being reflected back to us, and we start to pay attention to the patterns that keep coming up, like if you take note of, let's say if you start your awareness on Monday and you're like, okay, this week I'm really going to focus in on what's being reflected to me. I'm going to really focus in on what is being shown to me, and I'm going to write it down. I'm going to take note of everything, and I'm going to say, okay, on Monday I felt a lot of anger coming in from people. On Tuesday I felt a lot of anger, but then on Wednesday I started to feel really sad. It started to feel really heavy. But then on Thursday I started to feel really happy. But pay attention to the cycles and the emotions and what's coming up in you. Because when you can start to consciously then switch that, where you're in the moment and you're saying, okay, I know that I'm feeling triggered and I am feeling emotional because the last time that someone said this to me, I reacted this way. I cried. I felt shameful. I felt like I wasn't good enough to receive their love. And if you can then flip the script to how you then want to experience. So then if someone comes with you, with saying something to, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna meet them with love because I choose to feel love within me, because I know my strength within myself. So I'm gonna choose compassion because I want to feel compassion. It's switching the dialogue, it's switching the energy. It is kind of like I don't even want to use the word manipulation because that is such a taboo word, but it is. You can manipulate it in a loving way. You can use this in a way of consciously creating the reality that you want. You get to choose. I say this all the time too. It's like we have infinite opportunities and choices in every single moment of the day. And we change and evolve, and we can be whoever we want to be every single moment of the day, any time, any whatever. When we bring the awareness around this pattern and this ego, we can choose to be different. Even now, from the beginning of this video to choosing differently now. Look at the power that you have within you to do this work. This is how you change your life. This is how you change the game, because you realize that when you continuously flex the muscle of your consciousness and the conscious energy begins to be easier to identify, it's easier to tap into that versus the fear, that's when you change your life. Because then all of your decisions and choices, all this infinite opportunity is then conscious. It's then able to be chosen in a way that resonates with your soul, with your heart. Okay. Okay, so I want to talk about, so there were two things that came up that really hit me pretty big, because it was a life lesson that I was moving through. So one of them was, the past has no power to stop you from being present now. Only your grievances of the past can do that. I'm going to repeat that again. The past has no power to stop you from being present now. Only your grievances of the past can stop you. So what are grievances? Are you ready? The baggage of old thought and emotion. Our grievances and our past hurt is just an old bag of thoughts and emotions that are not who we are anymore. But what happens is it becomes more comfortable to hold on to that bag because that's all we know. Because when we're used to being in that cycle of old thought, when we choose differently, we don't know what the outcome is. We don't know what's going to happen. And when we talk about the ego and the comfort zone and living in the past and in the future, the uncertainty of choosing differently, of the unknown, of what that can bring in, the ego spirals out of control because it doesn't know how to keep us alive. Because all the choices that we've made up until this point has kept us alive. So if we choose something different, ego's like, how is that gonna happen? We're gonna die. We're not gonna live. This isn't gonna work. And we spiral, and then we go back into these old beliefs. It's like, yeah, no, I need to choose this again because I remember that outcome. I have to go back to that. And we stay in this shell of this old thought and this old emotion, not even realizing that the power to create is just outside of that. That was such a game changer. Because you realize that your past has no control over you. The only reason it has control over you is because you're choosing to allow it to do so. This is still something that I work so hard on, especially with all the trauma. And guys, we all experience trauma. We all have these traumatic experiences. We can decide and we can choose to live in that and continuously pull from that, or we can understand that that part of us created us now, and that part of us created the strength and cultivated the strength that we have now. And now, because of that experience, we can choose different. Because of that experience, we found the strength we needed to choose differently. You switch it from this victim mentality of why did this happen to me, and you switch it to how is this my power? How is this serving me? Let's look at this in a way that this is going to propel me forward into me achieving all of my wildest dreams. And that is the transformation of ego into consciousness. And I even think that that's ego into like higher self, into intuition, like all of these things. So when we talk about developing and choosing and all of these different things, it's like that is the difference between authentic truth, because you know that deep down in our hearts, we know that these experiences are coming from spirit, they're coming from love, they're coming from our soul's expansion. And when we decide to look at it in that way of what is this teaching me, what is this showing me, instead of the victim mentality, instead of the, having to people please and give and give and give and being the villain and other people are the villain, we understand that, okay, this is showing me something in myself and I can take my power back. So let's take it back. Let's live from a more wholesome, loving place, because when we live from that wholesome, loving place, we can create and we can bring in the impossible into the possible. It's incredible. It's so powerful. Okay. Now, one thing, and I'm still unraveling this, but I think I'll share it with you. I want to look into forgiveness. When we talk about the past and we have these past experiences and we hold on to them, I think part of the grasp that we hold on to is like, one, it's comfortable because we don't know any better, right? Like we say, this uncertainty of choosing differently, of choosing love when all we've chosen is hate, can feel really, really foreign to us, and it can feel really uneasy. And what I'm realizing is forgiveness to me is very multi-layered. And I think the important thing with forgiveness is you can move through these different levels as you continuously, consciously choose to do so. So what I mean by that is forgiveness. He says something in the book that says something like, in order to move past this, I have to forgive them. And that to me feels like ego. It's trying to control the situation. I have to do something in order to have peace. I have to choose forgiveness because that's the only way to peace. And that to me feels like an ego attachment, an ego need to do something, when we know already in us is peace. So what I realized is instead of choosing, I want to make sure I get this right, instead of choosing the need to forgive, we reflect on the situation and what it's showing us, and through that we transform into forgiveness. We transform it into love. It's not like, okay, they hurt me, I'm going to forgive them now because I don't want it to hold me down anymore. It's like, hold on, why did this abuse happen? Why did this happen? And what is this teaching me about myself? Because what happens is you rediscover a part of yourself that has been hidden, and a part of yourself that incarnated into this experience to be exposed, to be brought to light. And through that, naturally, organically, it transforms into and it blossoms into forgiveness. And I think that happens through unconditional love, because you realize even these people that abused you, even if you abused yourself, or made these mistakes or these choices that maybe you feel in the past maybe didn't reflect the best thing back to you, or didn't shine things in enough light, or whatever the story is that we tell ourselves. When we decide to open up the space to allow spirit and allow the universe to say and show us that through this abuse, this is the beauty that comes from it. This is the transformation. Naturally, forgiveness coincides with the unconditional love, because you know that you have now deepened your understanding of self-love and unconditional love. And that is why I feel like we are here. And that is why I feel like the power of the ego and of this book and everything in this is so important. Because what it's actually doing is It's strengthening up your understanding of the truth of life, because that's why I feel like we're here. Okay, on my soapbox, but we're gonna keep going. The ego always has to be right. It always has to prove something to someone else. Like if you're in an argument or you're in a discussion and you're like, I know I'm right. I read this somewhere. I know I'm right. I looked up statistics of this. I knew this and I knew that. And you're like, I know that I'm right in this situation. That's just ego. Sometimes I find the most authentic power comes from listening. Because if you are having a discussion with someone and you feel the need to prove a point, what is that showing to you? What part of your ego is coming up for the need to show something someone? Whereas if we were to tune into the listening of it, listening to what they're presenting to you, listening to what they're showing you, that's where the power comes in, the authentic power. There's a difference in this space of listening and opening up to what is being shown to you versus having to prove the point, having to be right. Even if you are right, it doesn't matter. It's opening up the opportunity to what is being shown to you at that time. Okay. Okay, we talked about that. Okay. Ego's need is to stand out. Like we said, it's to be special, to be in control, the need for power, attention, more. And it creates more separation. The more, I say this, the more that I was choosing like these fancy things, but it was out of this need for, to feel loved, I kept taking one step further away from myself. And then I would choose it again, and I was taking another step away from myself. And I was separating myself from my authentic self into a more emptiness. And it's really powerful, but it's even more powerful when you discover the understanding and the awareness of, look at how much separation can occur, but look at how much more you can bring in now because of it. Look at how much more it's strengthened up within you because of it, how much you can now change. And it's almost like when these lessons come up, it's like they're coming up, we see them, and it's like, now we deepen this understanding and now we can move forward. Now we can move into this like deeper understanding of life, and we can receive more from the universe. We can create more depth in our relationships. We can create more depth in our careers and in our financial stability and whatever it may be. Depth, authentic depth starts to come in, and it's very powerful. Okay. So I want to talk about, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to reiterate it and expand a little bit more on it. So we talk about you becoming, hold on one second, I want to back up. I want to talk about being versus doing, because this was another big lesson for me, and I still catch myself in it. The ego always thinks that you have to do something. It always thinks that you have to do your to-do list throughout the day. And granted, in order to manifest and move forward, we do have to take action steps, and we do have to create that forward momentum and actually physically take the step forward. But there's a difference between that and the doing of, I'm not doing enough, I have to do this because no one's gonna like me, I have to do this because no one is gonna listen to me if I don't, I have to do this because I'm not good enough, I have to. Instead of sitting in the being of who we are and allowing, sometimes the action step is in just being who we are. Sometimes that's just us sitting in the emotion and just being where we're at. It's understanding that sometimes unhappiness creeps in. Sometimes fearful thoughts creep in. And if we take the time and we sit and we just be within ourselves, when we talk about the healing journey, like, we do a lot of things to heal. We go get Reiki done, we work with a shaman, we go to classes, we read books, we talk, we do all these things. But sometimes the action step is just being within ourselves and opening it up to, what is this showing me? Why do I feel unhappy? Why can't I just feel whole with just being who I am? What part of me doesn't feel worthy enough of just being who I am and expressing myself in that way? The ego will have us do like all these busy work. It has us do like, we have to do all of these things to like fill up our time, because if we're just sitting in who we are, that's not good enough. And I think that part of that comes in with society. Part of that comes in with this like striving to like have to do something in order to be important. And that's not how it is, because we're already important. So it's almost like sitting in and unraveling the unhappiness, sitting in, feeling it and saying, okay, I feel unhappy today. I'm going to sit in this, I'm going to honor it. And then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to ask why I feel unhappy. What was the trigger that made me feel unhappy? And when we look at the trigger of where that unhappiness is stemming from, then we can begin to unravel the story. We can begin to look at the root of where our unhappiness stems from. Okay. But sometimes in order to do that, you just have to be still. You just have to be within yourself. And it's almost like tapping in. When I talk about that stillness between, it's almost like tapping into the stillness and that wholesomeness, and then starting to look at where the like fragmented pieces are, like looking at, why do I feel the unhappiness? Why am I feeling fear today? Like, what is the fear showing me? Where is this stemming from? And it's unraveling that belief. Okay. Making sure I'm covering everything that I want to. Yeah, okay. So I will leave you with this, because what I think we're going to do is, because there's a lot in this, I want to pick up with next month with the pain body. And actually, because I feel like the whole middle to end of the book is so deep that I want to do another video on it. So we'll do the pain body, breaking free, finding who you are, and the discovery of that inner space. I think we will do in the next video. So we'll sit with this, we'll marinate this. The one thing I want to leave you with is, your life is a bundle of thoughts and emotions from the past. And that past no longer has to have control over you. And you get to make the conscious choice when you want to allow that to be free, when you want to break free. And in the next video, we'll talk about different ways of breaking free, different ways of experiencing the awareness. But with this, begin to take note of, I feel like for this month, it's important to almost look at what emotions are being shown to you, and diving into, one, where those emotions show up in your body, because that's a part of the pain body. So let's already start to bring our awareness around that. Take note of what emotions come up and where they are. So if you feel fear and you notice that it feels like a heavy chest, like anxiety, take note of that and write it down. If you start to feel shame and you start to get a stomach ache and you feel it in your solar plexus, write that down. If you begin to feel like you're unworthy and your knees start to hurt, that's root chakra. Start to take note of that and write it down. Because when you start to identify the emotion that's coming up and where you are holding on to it within your body, we can start to unravel and discover the pain body and how it is showing up. Then we can start to understand how to move that energy through, how to create the space, how to let it go, how to break free. And that will lead into the next video. Also take note of two things. One, where your energy is being focused. So say it's Monday, it's a fresh week, or Sunday, whatever, however you look at it, and you want to experience more fulfillment, or you want to experience more romance in your relationships, or you want to experience more unconditional love. Set that as the intention, bring that into your awareness every single morning when you wake up. Add that into like your morning routine and say out loud, I am feeling more romance in my relationships. Then 2, take note of, on the flip side, if you feel more unworthy one day, write it down, journal about it. If it's like on a Wednesday and you're like, man, I just spent time with my best friend and I'm starting to feel really sad, write it down and write down almost like who you were with, the emotions that came up, and then start to look at why that came up. Start to unravel it. Let's start to really like pick into and start to unravel like how the ego is showing up. And I feel like the ego shows up in the best ways through our relationships. Like it's everything being reflected back to us. So begin to bring our awareness around that. But then also I want to create more uplifting. So let's then focus in on what we do want to create. So if it is, I am experiencing more, love within my relationships, then let's really focus our awareness on that. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm excited for the next one. If there are questions, I will be sending out those invites to the Facebook group. So we will begin to discuss and have more open communication. So I will talk to you guys soon.